and Events Committee who made this possible, as well as our panelists, and especially Jennifer Richards, one of the APA's publicists, and the APA staff, and Telspan for not only organizing the webinar, but fixing it from last week. So as I noted, you may or may not have seen, there is a chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. We will be doing questions at the end, and I have some that were emailed in, but if you have questions that come up, feel free to type them in there, and we'll do our best to get to them. So we're going to start with introductions of the panel. We have Robin Whitten, founder and editor of AudioFile magazine, Candace Levy, the 2016 APA Audiobook Blogger of the Year and blogger at Beth Fish Reads, and Mitch Kelly, who will represent the publisher side of things from his post in the marketing and PR department at Hachette Audio. So the first of three things we're going to be talking about is the actual writing of an audiobook review. Candace and Robin will be sharing their thoughts, but I have to say I'm glad that they're going to include a pretty important item that is neglected more often than you'd think in an audiobook review, and that is the narrator's name.
That's very true. I don't think I've made that mistake myself, but I may have come close. But we do want, that's the one thing I think is important to have in an audiobook review. Don't you, Robin?
Absolutely, and it's nice to have a narrator remind us of that.
That's true. But I know that sometimes people don't know what else to say. They'll say, here's the name of the narrator, and I like the audiobook. But much more helpful than that are to include some of the things we have listed here, how the narrator did characterizations of each person in the book. Accents seem to be a big thing. People from the South are very aware of whether it was the correct Southern accent. I'm a Yankee, so I don't know those things, but if you know about accents, that's a great thing to add into your review.
Great, and I always think that one of the things about accents, because if you do come from some part of the country and you're listening to someone speaking and having an accent from another part, if you believe it as the listener, then that's good. If you're not believing it, or you know that something is wrong because you know more about the accent, then that's something that you can always talk about. But if it's believable, you know, I'm not going to try to figure it out.
No, I agree. I don't think you have to know French or know Italian to know that the narrator gave that flavor to the characters' voices in a believable way. And if you think it's not believable, that's a good thing to write about too in your review.
Right, because oftentimes it's something that takes you out of, you think, what was that? And if it's taken you out of the mood or out of the atmosphere, then that can be a jarring thing.
I absolutely agree. And my other main point I often make in my reviews, if you read my reviews, I'm often talking about timing and pacing. What I like to hear from a narrator and something that I comment a lot about in my reviews is whether the narrator has caught the pacing of the book. If it's a thriller, the pacing will change. You know, there's the creepy, slow scenes where they're going through some dark building and then suddenly the action. And I like to feel that and hear that in a book, so I often write about that. It might not be important to you. That's one thing I would like to just stop here a second and say, we're not dictating here how you should write your reviews. We're more talking about some of the things you might think about adding to your reviews, because your own voice and the things about an audiobook that affects your listening experience are valid, even if they're not the things that I listen to. So I want you to know that.
Right, and I completely agree, because in trying to listen to an audiobook and then write about it, all of us are writing about kind of the same things. We might pick different things, but having your own voice and expressing it, whether it's how you discuss the pace of the narration or an accent, you bring your own voice to it and you describe it in your own way. And I think that's what makes the reviews so interesting and posts very different and personal.
Absolutely, and I did want to make that point because I didn't want somebody to think that there was only one way to review an audiobook and there were only certain things to talk about. These are just the things that Robin and I kind of thought about right at the top of our heads. But another thing, we'll catch this last point on the slide here, and that is not all books are necessarily suitable for the audiobook format. And sometimes if you are having trouble with an audiobook, you might want to think about that. Is it the narrator, or is it perhaps the type of book itself that is giving you trouble?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, Candace, because there are things that are very tricky when it's not just a straight up narration. If a book has footnotes, charts, shifting timelines, and those are all things that can be a real challenge when someone takes a book and produces it as an audiobook. And some narrators, these are all artistic choices that are being made with the producers and the engineers and narrators. And there are sometimes better ways to handle, but something that is not just a straight narrative text. And I think that is something that is great when you get a title that has charts or it has footnotes. How it's handled is a great thing to talk about.
It is. Personally, I always appreciate it when the audiobook publisher provides a PDF with charts or maps, and I always make a point of saying that in my reviews because I do think it's such a plus. And I think by mentioning in the review, I'm hoping to send a message to the audiobook publishers that this really does help make an audiobook better for certain kinds of books.
Right, right. And one of the things that I like to include is particularly keeping the focus on what makes the audio experience different from if I had been reading it with my eyes. So it's those kind of things. What is different? What is better? What is maybe something's being lost? Or am I discovering something totally new by listening to the book? Maybe it's an emotion, a very strong emotion, or a connection with a particular character. Those are great things to talk about.
Right. I love it when I'm listening to a book, let's say from a part of the country, a part of the world that I don't know at all. For instance, Southeast Asia, and you can actually, when the narrator gets the pronunciations, and you say, "Oh, that's how you say that name," because when you're reading it, you tend to just kind of gloss over it.
Great.
And this slide that's up there now are some other kinds of things that you might consider. Lots of this depends on your own blog audience, and if you're not a blogger, whether you're writing this up on Facebook, your thoughts, or on Tumblr or Twitter or something, you might have room or you might have desire to talk about length of audiobook, and which I think is important because some people don't have a lot of time to get through a book. So for them, maybe a 6-hour book is the ideal commuter book. And so, that would be a plus, for example.
Right, And on the other hand, maybe someone wants to settle in for a very long evening or a long trip, and then to have the length is also, a great sustaining thing to know that you'll be able to, drive all the way, get through that 6 or 8 hour trip without interruption and have the same story going on.
Right. I like that. And what I like next on this list is the audiobook, listing the audiobook publisher and the year of publication. That's great, so that if you've given a great review of an audiobook and I want it, this helps me track it down at the library or at a site that I can buy it from. And also, we're bloggers. We don't necessarily listen to the very newest audiobooks out there. So year of publication is important. I sometimes review books from 10 years ago if I'm starting over at the beginning of a mystery series, for example. So it's good for people to know this information to help them track down the book for themselves.
Great, and I was just going to mention something that some of the people listening might not know, is that there actually are 2 copyrights. There's a performance copyright, which is the year of the publication of the audiobook, which is beside the little P, and then of course there's the copyright of when the book was actually written. So that may make a difference. Sometimes when the actual recording was done years or some amount of time or many centuries after the book was written. But that little P symbol, that's what that's about.
I don't know if I actually knew that, so great.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, I know. I like learning things. The audience for the audiobook, that's kind of fits in with what Robin was saying earlier about how what made the book better or worse. Sometimes you can have a really great narrator, but you yourself were not crazy about the story. So think about that when you write your review too, and try to separate out what the narrator did versus whether or not you liked the book. For example, I'm not a big romance reader. So if I listen to a romance audiobook, I try to stay away from commenting too much about my personal feelings about the genre. No offense to anybody out there who reads romance. I'm sure you don't read what I read either, but try to separate that out from the narrator. So if you have a great narrator but you didn't like the book, that's good information for people. Or if you love the book but didn't like the narrator, that's also good. Say why. And when you say why, then I can say, well, it doesn't bother me that the person took long pauses between chapters, for example. So by more information that you can give your readers, the better able we are to say whether that's a book we would want to listen to or not. Because the things you don't like may be things that don't bother me at all, or the other way around.
Right. That's a good point. And we just skipped over that. I guess that was, sorry, I'm looking at an old slide. You're on the right one. The embedded sound clip was the one I was thinking of.
Oh, right. I forgot about that one.
We skipped over that just to say that that's sometimes a nice thing to add into your reviews and posts that and there are a couple things. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit maybe with Mitch and the publishers, but SoundCloud is a great resource, and also the publishers are making sound clips much more available and usable from their sites.
Yes. So here I kind of jumped into the when you have problems with audiobooks. Of course, I probably don't have to tell anybody out there this, whether you're a blogger or you're on Litzy or Goodreads or Twitter. We do want to hear what the problems are. Your readers, your followers want to know, but remember that there are real people behind that book, and the narrator's a real person. And so be honest, but be kind. That's my biggest advice for writing negative reviews.
and negative reviews or comments about with criticism are the hardest things to write well. To not overdo, not sort of go on and on about a fault which may or may not be. It may color the entire post and the entire review. And that may be most important to you, but sometimes the negative things can really overshadow when you want to get to when you want to get to the good part, and especially if you start with it. A lot of people, we find that they sometimes that's it. That's a stopper. They don't go and come because they don't go further into the review to read all the other good things you have to say or the other points that you want to make. So kind of balancing where you put the criticism and how you you explain your views. But I agree with Candace that there are lots of people who've put lots of time, and certainly they've also made artistic choices because we're talking about a performance. And I think that's really something important to think about, that there are lots of artistic choices made along the way.
That's true. That's true. I see a comment, and I'm going to skip right to that bullet point of what's Edelweiss. Edelweiss and NetGalley are places where many bloggers can get review copies, usually e-print copies of ebook copies of books for review. On those sites, they ask you to either write a review or link your review. And although they don't offer audio books for review at those sites, it is a good place to sometimes pop in. You can write a review. You can link your blog review to those places. And it's a good way. It's part of being a courteous reviewer. You can let the publishers know that you listened to the book and what you thought about it. And so that's another place besides your blog where you can connect with the audiobook publisher, which you'll be hearing about in a section or two to come.
Great.
This slide is mostly talking about kind of the difference between when you write for your blog and let's say you want to become a freelance reviewer and write for a publication or write for a professional website. When you write for your blog, when I write for my blog, I'm writing my point of view, how much I like the book, what I thought, using the word I maybe or maybe not, but it's definitely a subjective viewpoint. When you read a review in a magazine or on a review website, you're getting kind of a stepped back version. Somebody's trying to be more objective and trying to write from a viewpoint of other readers, other listeners. Robin can talk more about this.
Yeah.
So,
it's well, the magazine AudioFile actually has to, we have almost 100 different reviewers. So we're trying to step back just a little bit and present many points of view. But it's also realizing that it's going to be objective in a way that if I were writing on my personal blog, it wouldn't necessarily be there. So one of the little distinctions that we use is not to use the first person, but the AudioFile reviews are written in the third person. So that's just a small step back. It doesn't mean that it's any less opinionated often, but it does make a small distinction. And I think that we encourage the reviewers to think about giving enough personal opinions in the review, but also thinking about we want to explain what the listening experience is going to be for someone else. Now that's subjective and it's personal, but that's the point. We're trying to explain what the listening experience might be, what I think the listening experience, or another one of the reviewers. And it is in terms of the library world, it's called Reader's Advisory. That's what the librarians do when they're trying to help you find great audiobooks, or Listener's Advisory. It's a little different from your personal blog, and it makes a really great contrast and gives the whole conversation of talking about audiobooks a lot of dimension.
That's true. I like both myself. I like the personal, the very personal, the gushy reviews, the emotional reviews, and I like the step back ones. I do think it offers balance. Here's some resources where you can buy or download audiobooks, where you can find reviews, where you can learn more about the audiobook world. One thing I really want to point out here, which is a great resource, is the Audiobook Lexicon, which is like a glossary of terms. So when you're trying to write your review and you say, well, what is that noise? Am I trying to say drama or expression or tone? What am I trying to say? Check out this lexicon. You might just find the exact word you're looking for. I know it helps me a lot.
Yep.
So this is Karen. Go ahead, Robin. Sorry.
Nope. We just want everyone to be sure that they're listening lots and lots and reading reviews from other people, because it gives you a whole context of how to form your own reviews and conversation.
Great. So I think Jen just typed this into the chat box, but these links will be live in the downloadable version of this PowerPoint, which will be on the APA website next week. So we're going to move on to the next section, where Candace and Mitch will share some tips for amplifying your reviews, how to get the word out to a wider audience using social media. And we're going to start with a list of places that you can post about your review.
Okay, so sharing on social media, I imagine that most people are on Facebook and Twitter. If you are not, please make an account today. You can do it tonight right after this webinar. Those are obviously the big two. On the right-hand side, you will notice some other resources, platforms that maybe you're not so familiar with. Goodreads. A lot of people know about that. That's a social media and recommendation site devoted to books, cataloging your library, getting reviews out, and getting recommendations. Litsy is a brand new site. It works kind of similar to Goodreads, except its interface looks closer to Instagram. It's really fun if you're visual. So if you are into pictures or graphics or anything, it's definitely something that you should look into. Library Thing.
And it hasn't. Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say, Litsy has a pretty amazingly active audiobook following, so you'll find a lot of other audiobook fans and get good recommendations there.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on, Library Thing is cataloging and social media, very similar to Goodreads. Tumblr is a blogging platform that's best suited for short-form content. It's a great way to cross-post your review, or if you want to supplement your blog or your site with some shorter content. It's really, it's a really, really great tool. And then Instagram, of course, is pictures, which everybody loves.
Yeah.
You'll also notice, sorry, Candace.
No, that was fine. I was just agreeing with you. Go on.
Oh, great. I also want to point out the handles Audiobook Community and Audiophile Magazine. You should be following both of them. Obviously, they aren't a publisher, so they're posting about all sorts of titles, all sorts of events like this webinar, events during BEA or APAC or anything else. So follow those for sure.
If you want to learn more, find out the new books or learn about a new narrator, all those sites are great places to connect with other listeners.
Absolutely. And on this slide, we have some major handles, accounts from publishers. These are also really, really great people to follow. In addition to this, I would also recommend you find your favorite authors, your favorite narrators. You follow them. I'll mention this a little bit later on, but tag us as well. Make sure that if you post a review on one of our titles that you try to mention us. And I know that on Twitter it can be a little bit difficult because of the character restriction. But if you are at all able to tag us or mention us, please do so.
I agree. I try my best when I post a blog review, or even if I'm just listening. It's just fun to say, just started whatever book. I'm loving it, or making my afternoon gardening go great, and then I'll tag the Audiobook Publisher, or I'll use we're going to get into hashtags, I'll use the hashtag audiobooks, or if I happen to know the narrator's handle, I'll put that on too. It's just kind of a fun way to connect with other people. And let the audio publishers know that you're listening to their books.
Yeah. And as you can see on the screen, there are other things to hashtag. Hashtags are really great because it helps people who are into audiobooks find you, into reading, into listening. So use these, please. They are also easier for the publisher and the authors to track conversations, because they're not going to be able to follow every blogger, every reviewer. But by looking at these hashtags, maybe we find somebody who we didn't know before and start following them, or whatever. So again, go back, take a look at this list, and try to hashtag your tweets and your posts on Facebook and everywhere else.
I agree. I try to do it as much as possible.
Yeah. Again, it can be difficult, especially on Twitter, just because of the character restriction. So.
Okay, so are you guys ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
All right. So in our next section, Mitch and Robin are going to share some ideas and guidelines for working with audiobook publishers. And one important thing to note is that the audiobook publisher is not always the same publisher as the print and ebook publisher, or at least not in the same department with the same personnel.
That's a really good thing to remind people of, because it can be very confusing. But that's good to check before you start with looking for a publisher, is to be sure you've got the audio publisher.
Correct. And I am always happy to hear from people who are currently reviewing audiobooks or want to start reviewing audiobooks. I do try to provide review copies. Not everything is available always. And other publishers might have different policies. All of this to say, don't be discouraged if you reach out to a publisher and they aren't able to give you a review copy. That is not a sign that they don't care or anything else. So you'll notice on the slide, you can find a full list of audiobook publishers on the APA website. I tried this URL tonight that's listed. I had problems going to it. So if you go to audiopub.org, you click on the members pull-down menu and select member directory, that'll get you to the same page. And then you'll see links for every single publisher, or most publishers. And then if you are, if you're unable to get a review copy from a publisher, please consider using library or buying through Downpour or Audible or Audiobooks.com or any of these other retailers. They're really, really, obviously I love the library. They're really, really great resources. Not only can you get some great recommendations, but you can find audiobooks to listen to for free through the library. My Wi-Fi went down, so I'm trying to figure out on slides. Robin, can you hear me?
Okay, we're on enhancing your post,
Sure.
and I can pick up. I think that Mitch had mentioned before that the Audiobook Publishers name is a great thing to include with a tag, the name, and if you can, put a tag into your post. Oftentimes the publishers use Google Alerts, so when someone's talking about them, they can pick it up. But it's even easier when there's a tag. And then also be able to tag the narrators by name. I think somebody was just asking about that. The narrators, I think, more and more have been improving their websites and are more active on social media, so I think it is easier to find them and connect, and also to get the right tag to go into your post. We did talk a minute ago about sound clips, and publishers do have a way of oftentimes pointing you to the right place to get the sound clips. Mitch, have you gotten back on?
I have. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, so we put sound clips for every single title that we publish on SoundCloud. For those of you who don't know what SoundCloud is, it's a social media site directory for sound clips, music, all sorts of things audio related. So if you go to soundcloud.com/Hachette Audio, you will find everything that we've published within the past, 2 years, and then some titles that go beyond that. I know a lot of publishers are using SoundCloud as well. We are not the only ones. So SoundCloud is a really, really great tool. There is an easy way to embed. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you go to the page, you'll see a little
arrow thing?
Yeah, icon. Thank you. The share button. And from there you can get the code to embed directly on your site. So it'll make it easier on people who are reading your review because they won't need to go to a separate page. They won't have to go to our SoundCloud or anybody else's SoundCloud. They can listen directly from where they're reading the review. It's a really, really great tool.
Great. And one of the things that I love about the SoundCloud displays is they often will pick up a jacket image, and also the sound wave, so it makes a very visually it's not a tiny little button that someone might miss. If you want to really, these are all about the sound. That's what we're here for, so we can hear them. So if you can put that prominently into your, which SoundCloud allows, that looks great.
Yeah. And then the final thing on this, if you send a link to the Audio Publisher with your review, I love it when I hear back from bloggers, from reviewers who have reviewed one of our titles. Not only does it make sure that I see the review, but it's a great way for me to connect. I'm a people person. I like to talk. I like to see how everybody's doing. I like to stay connected. So I really, really do love to hear from people. So yeah, that is definitely another thing to consider.
Can I just add in, I see the question that just came up about upcoming releases. I think one of often the publishers do have great lists of upcoming releases, depending on how far out and whether it's a full list. It would depend on the publisher. But AudioFile also has a comprehensive list of across all audio publishers, all subjects, hundreds of audiobooks that are being released over we do them every 3 months. And for my staff that does this work, it's, everybody should read them all the time for the amount of work that goes into compiling it, because if you think about how many publishers are involved and getting all the titles and everything, but it's not a link, but it does give a date and information with the title and author and narrator, as much as is known. So that's, there's a ton of information there.
Yes.
Mitch, there's a question on the SoundCloud. You got that?
Yep. Oh, I didn't see the question on the SoundCloud. What was the question?
Can you search SoundCloud for a particular title? Is that to find?
You can. I find their search to be kind of difficult, so make sure that you use quote marks around the title. Otherwise, they'll just be looking for those words anywhere within a post.
Right, and you get lots of really interesting music with the name. Yeah.
So use within for your title, and then use quotes for the author. It's just not the most robust search, unfortunately, but you can search. I also noticed Gail's question about.
Okay.
Do you mind when when bloggers review audiobooks 6 months after they come out? Is the link of the review still helpful to you? The answer to that is it doesn't really. For me, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, we like to get the word out close to publication date, close to on sale date. But if there's an older title. Or a title that was published half a year ago. Yeah, I totally like to get those links as well. I also want to the turnaround time for publishers is a little bit different than print publishers. Some of you know this, some of you don't. Print publishers, you can get like an ARC or an eGalley months before a book pubs. Usually for us, our turnaround time is we'll have quite often only 3 weeks of having final audio and having a title go up for sale. So when you're looking at the upcoming releases, just be mindful that the audio book may not be ready till yet.
Okay, so now is the section on audiobook events and features. We have a lot of links here for you, and we're not going to go through every slide specifically, but it'll be something that if you want to download PowerPoint next week, then can go through it in your own time and check out these links. But Candace, do you want to actually anybody want to talk about June is audiobook month to start?
Well, have somebody else talk about that because I did want to talk about a blogger of the year.
Okay.
So when we get to that slide, I'll talk.
I can talk about it. It's
go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, everyone has their own, and June is audiobook month. So there is a lot of stuff going on. And it's there are the announcements of the Audi Awards. I guess that comes up here too. But there are lots of opportunities. Usually around just being connected to the Audio Publishers Association activities. They make it easy. Sometimes there's a big project going on that you can be a part of, but it's very simple things. And the audiobook community make it a great event to be a part of.
And then the armchair Audies, was that what you want to talk about, Candace, or did you want to talk about Audiobook Blogger of the Year?
Audiobook Blogger of the Year, although Jennifer couldn't be here tonight. And Jennifer of Literate Housewife started this great event that happens every spring as soon as the Audies are announced. And it's the listener's choice, you might say. And she gets people to volunteer to listen to either a whole section of audiobooks, let's say the biographies, or I don't remember all the different awards, or middle grade books, or full cast.
Genres.
And then they make the listener, meaning you, or we, bloggers, make our choices of what we think should win the awards. And then the night of the Audies, Jennifer announces when the Audies are announced, she announces the Armchair Audie winners, as well as, we get to hear who actually won the awards. It's a lot of fun. There's always plenty of room for people to join in. And every spring, look for her on Twitter, and you will get all the information to join right in.
Great.
And
now
I did want to talk about becoming Audiobook Blogger of the Year, which I am this year. And Jennifer was last year. The main thing I want to do is tell you, I encourage everybody to enter this. You don't have to feel like you're not popular enough, or you're don't review only all the newest books. That's okay. If you love audiobooks and you can write about audiobooks, and you have a voice, your own authentic voice that you talk about audiobooks for, you have as good a chance as anybody of becoming the Audiobook Blogger of the Year. And if you look at Jennifer's website, where the link is up there on the slide, and mine, you will see we are very different in the way we approach our audiobook reviews. And that's proof that there isn't just one style. And I really, I'm still overwhelmed having been invited to go to the Audies and to meet all the narrators and to meet the celebrity host, which was Paula Poundstone this year. It's a great way of getting involved with the audiobook community, and you shouldn't shy away from this. And if you applied one year and didn't make it, apply again. It took me 2 times. So keep trying, and just come up with your own voice, your own thoughts. Don't try to imitate anybody, and good luck. I don't know what else to say. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I think one thing to say is I know that this year the finalists, you and then the other runners-up, between the 3 of you, I don't think the blogs could have been more different. So I think what you just said about, trust your own style and your own voice is true.
I know one
okay,
of the runners-up was a big...
Oh, yeah.
Oh. No, go on. Move along.
Well, great. So some other suggestions that we had for getting involved in the audiobook community, or to inspire you if you want to do things other than simply review audiobooks, are joining an audiobook challenge. And we've got some resources here, and those will be live links, again, on the downloadable, but places that are already hosting challenges, but you can also start your own. And these are some other special events. Again, bloggers who are already doing month-long events that you could join in on. And here are some other ideas for, again, things to do if you're sort of need some inspiration for new things to do. And I think we're going to move on to questions. And one I want to start with that was emailed in has to do with that last slide. And I think I'm going to direct this to you, Mitch. This person, it's Tamara from Shelf Addiction, says, in addition to my book blog, I have a literary-driven podcast, and I enjoy interviewing authors. I love audiobooks and review quite a lot of them, so naturally I'd like to begin incorporating some audiobook narrator interviews from the audiobooks that I recommend. How would a blogger or podcaster begin? How do you recommend we gain access to audiobook narrators to interview?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I have had requests like that in the past. The majority of the time, I am unable to connect the narrator, the blogger, podcast host, whomever, with a narrator. Part of it is our production team is really busy. I don't have a personal connection with a lot of narrators, especially if they aren't, we have like recurring narrators who are constantly in the studios. But if it's somebody who comes in once a year or a couple times a year or whatever, I don't really have a great way to get a hold of them. So definitely ask the publisher. The publisher may not be able to help you. And then maybe check to see if they have a site. Try to reach out to them directly yourself. You can get creative there, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think personally I have a website and my contact information is on there. Audiophile Magazine on there. Robin, you want to explain how people can find narrators there?
Right. We have a section of narrators that have they have their public websites there and their social connections on a lot of those profiles. And we also have an industry directory. So there's contact information there as well for some of the narrators that are in that directory. But they choose what to make public and what to make available. So that's a good way to go.
Great. Okay, so then here's a question that was emailed in from Gail Weisswasser, and she asks, when reviewing an audiobook, how much of the review should be devoted to the book itself, and how much should be devoted to the audio performance? And I know that at Audiophile Magazine, you have very specific parameters. Candace, you want to talk about that?
I'm happy to answer that. I think a lot of this depends on your own blogging audience. For my own blog, I try to balance, I try to reach the balance that I think my readership is. And so I often start my reviews talking about the book itself because I have a lot of print readers. And then I finish my review with just the audio. I do it that way because that way the story's been told. I've talked about what the book's about, the genre, the audience, and all that, and now I can just focus on the narrator and the performance and all the things that we pointed out earlier in this presentation. So for me, I think my reviews tend to be probably 70% the book and the 30% the audiobook. But if you know that your audience is mostly audiobook listeners, then you might want to aim for a 50-50. I don't really think that there is a specific ratio that you need to be aiming for. Sometimes I do very short reviews, and when I do them, I do hit more of a 50-50 ratio of talking about the book and the audio. So I'm going to say trust your instincts. I think that that's the best way to go.
And then we had a similar question. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, just there definitely are different ways, and it has a lot to do with your audience.
Tamara, also from Shelf Addiction, had a similar question, and maybe Mitch could take this. Are there one or two things in an audiobook review that the publishers prefer to see consistently?
Yeah.
We talked about that at the beginning, but
yeah. Candace and Robin covered a lot of it. There's no, cookie cutter way to do an audiobook review. The things that I look for the most is some sign that it is actually an audiobook review. I read reviews sometimes where, it'll be indicated somewhere, like in the title, like an audiobook review, and I'll think, oh, great, and then I'll read it, but then there's no mention of any of the stuff that we talked about earlier in the webinar. So if you just put something in your review that indicates that you actually listened, specifically talking about the narrator, and I know some of you, this takes practice, this takes cultivation. If you aren't used to talking about voice and how narrators add to stories, books, it might be difficult for you to figure out. But so it's, you'll likely want to revert to something that's more comfortable. And I just encourage you, don't. Try to come up with vocabulary, use those resources that we talked about earlier, that lexicon. But there's nothing specific that I'm particularly looking for.
One thing I've noticed in reading reviews is that even separating by a paragraph when you are talking about either the book as the audiobook or the narrator's performance helps to visually distinguish between talking about the book itself and talking about the audiobook performance or production. We also have a question. This is from Jill Broderick from Rhapsody in Books, asks, and this is for me, I think, what information would narrators find most helpful in a review? Then what I would say, and taking off of what Mitch just said, is that to me, if something is specific, it is helpful to me. If it's just a generic, I didn't like this, or I loved it, that's not as helpful to me as I didn't believe the emotion in the love scene, or I was distracted by the choice that the narrator made with the father's voice. Anything that is specific, if I'm seeing that again and again in a review, then that helps me look at my own work and say, oh, I might need to change that. But I think also sometimes it's good to acknowledge that I just don't like this person's voice, and this is my personal response, rather than just saying that this person has a bad voice that is, because that becomes personal and hurtful to the narrator. So I think we have time for one more. Did someone want to say something else?
Yeah, I was, Karen, I was just going to say, this is Robin. I was just going to add a little bit about the what the narrators, I mean, I'm not speaking for a narrator, but what they want to hear. But I thought your point about being specific, that's what is good for narrators. But it's also really good for your audience. Because if someone says, oh, the accents were great, well, that's probably what most of us expect. But if you can get into the specifics of, that 60-year-old detective from Detroit had the best accent ever, it makes the whole review so much more interesting. So that building those specifics and also helps the narrator, but it helps your audience as well.
Or also saying that the use of accents made me feel like I was in Chicago. That you connect the technical, choices or work that the actor is doing to how it made you feel. And to me, that, as a listener and reader myself, I like it when reviews talk about the emotional response that they had, and that's where that first person writing point of view can really then be your style. All right, well, I think it's really about time to wrap this up. I'm going to go on to the next slide, which if you really take a look at this, if you want to have your information sent on to audiobook publishers, then contact Jennifer here, and there's her email, and provide that information. And we hope this is another way that we can connect you up with the marketing and publicity departments of these audiobook publishers. So I just want to thank again everyone who has come. Please do spread the word. This should be available sometime next week on the APA website. But thanks again to our panelists, Robin, Mitch, and Candace, for all your expertise.
And thanks for having us. And thanks, everybody, for coming to listen.
Yes.